The Eureka Timberline tent sold over 1 million units in its first 10 years on the market. It was the first freestanding lightweight backpacking tent ever made. Before the Timberline, camping required heavy canvas, wooden poles, and ground stakes driven deep enough to hold against the wind. After it, anyone could pitch a tent in under 5 minutes on bare rock, frozen ground, or a gravel bar in a riverbed. The Timberline redefined what camping looked like for an entire generation of Americans. 3 years before that tent launched, a Eureka design had sheltered 60 climbers on the first all-American ascent of Mount Everest, in conditions of minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit and winds exceeding 60 miles per hour. On October 19, 2023, Johnson Outdoors announced it was exiting the Eureka business entirely. After 128 years, the brand that had made tents for westward-bound pioneers, for the U.S. military in 2 world wars, and for the highest mountain on Earth was being discontinued. The camping products would be wound down through 2024. The Binghamton factory, the one the company had occupied for over a century, was sold to a defense contractor for $13.7 million. This is the full story of Eureka, from a canvas workshop on Commercial Avenue in Binghamton, New York in 1895, to the tent that summited Everest, to the first self-supporting backpacking tent in history, to 50 years inside a corporate portfolio that ultimately decided it would rather sell camp stoves. In the years before 1895, a small workshop on Commercial Avenue in Binghamton, New York, was making the things that frontier America needed. Binghamton was a manufacturing town in the southern tier of New York State, not a large city, not a famous one, but the kind of steady, working-class industrial community that underpinned most of the country's physical production in the late 19th century. The workshop on Commercial Avenue cut and sewed canvas. It made Conestoga wagon covers for settlers moving west. It made horse blankets. It made store awnings, cut from unfinished white cotton duck, designed to maximize light into a storefront window while keeping the afternoon sun off the sidewalk. It made American flags, cutting stars from dyed fabric and sewing strips of red and white bunting into the finished product. And it made tents. The tents from that early Binghamton workshop were assembled from untreated white army duck, a heavy, densely woven cotton canvas that, while it offered no waterproofing and no thermal insulation, was remarkably durable. One of those original tents remained hanging in the company's headquarters, completely intact and usable, for nearly 100 years. It was a product built before the 20th century, and it outlasted the century it came from. In 1910, 2 businessmen named Arthur D. Legg and Walter A. Dickerman purchased the company from its original owners. Dickerman's interest was bought out in 1925 by Legg's son, Arthur Carl Legg. The company continued under the Legg family for the next 56 years, longer than most American manufacturing businesses last in a single family's hands at any point in history. In 1930, the Leggs purchased a former mule barn that had belonged to the old Shenango Canal system, a relic of the pre-railroad era of New York State transportation. They converted it into Eureka's first dedicated factory. The canal was long gone. The barn was solid. The company that moved in would not leave Binghamton for the rest of its existence. Then the Second World War arrived. By the time the United States entered the war in December 1941, Eureka had been making tents for 46 years. It knew how to cut and sew canvas at scale, how to manage large material inventories, and how to produce a product that had to hold up in weather. The military needed all of that at a volume the company had never approached before. Eureka expanded into 5 large factory spaces across New York State. The workforce grew dramatically. The product was not the camping tent. It was the military hospital ward tent, a large, heavy canvas structure designed to be erected quickly in field conditions and to provide functional shelter for medical operations. Close to the front, Eureka manufactured hundreds of them. The same company that had made Conestoga wagon covers for settlers moving west was now making shelter for soldiers moving east toward Europe and south toward the Pacific. When the war ended, the returning GIS created a new problem for American housing. There were not enough homes. Millions of veterans came back to a country that had spent 40 years producing weapons instead of houses, and the shortage was severe. Many families bought mobile homes as a temporary solution. Mobile homes needed awnings. Eureka, with its canvas manufacturing infrastructure still running at scale, shifted to producing trailer awnings for the post-war mobile home market. The same machines, the same fabric, a different product for a different moment. By the late 1950s, that market had stabilized. Eureka turned its attention to something new. The post-war prosperity of the 1950s had given American families disposable income and automobiles. They were going outdoors. Not in the way that loggers and trappers went outdoors. For work, out of necessity. They were going outdoors for pleasure. Camping, fishing, hiking. The national park system was seeing visitor numbers it had never recorded before. The outdoor gear industry was about to experience a transformation, and a small tent company in Binghamton, New York, was about to help cause it. Eureka's engineers began developing a new tent design in the late 1950s. The existing technology for camping tents had not changed in any fundamental way since the Army surplus canvas structures of the 1940s, heavy, staked, pole-supported interiors that required flat ground, multiple stakes, and significant time to erect. The idea Eureka's designers were working toward was the opposite of all of that. An external frame, a structure that could stand on its own without stakes on any surface, a tent that could be set up by one person quickly in the dark, in the wind. They called the resulting design the Draw-Tite. The Draw-Tite was the first practical freestanding external frame tent designed for field use. It used a rigid external pole structure to support the tent body from the outside rather than the inside, eliminating the need for interior center poles that reduced usable space and created trip hazards. The tent attached to the frame using heavy-duty brass hooks, a system that allowed rapid setup and breakdown without requiring the user to thread poles through fabric sleeves. Zipper-type vents in the design prevented the condensation buildup that made conventional sealed tents cold and damp overnight. In 1960, the Draw-Tite caught the attention of someone who knew exactly what conditions a tent had to survive. Sir Edmund Hillary, the New Zealand mountaineer who, with Tenzing Norgay, had been the first documented person to summit Mount Everest in 1953, was planning a Himalayan expedition to Nepal. He needed tents that could be erected in high wind conditions, at altitude, in extreme cold. He took Eureka Draw-Tite tents. The word spread in mountaineering circles. In 1962, expedition leader Norman Dyhrenfurth and mountaineer Barry Bishop, two of the 19 climbers planning the first all-American Mount Everest expedition, contacted the Eureka factory in Binghamton. They needed tents capable of surviving the conditions on Everest. Sustained winds above 60 miles per hour, temperatures reaching minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and the physical stress of being erected and struck repeatedly by climbers at altitude, in gloves with diminished fine motor control. They worked directly with Eureka's engineers to refine the Draw-Tite design for the specific demands of the expedition. Heavy-duty brass hooks for faster attachment, improved venting to manage condensation at altitude, a lightweight profile that reduced the load on climbers already carrying everything they needed to survive. Eureka built 60 tents for the expedition. Each one was tested at 10,000 feet on Mount Rainier the year before the climb. In 1963, the American Everest expedition put 6 climbers on the summit of the highest mountain on Earth. Jim Whittaker became the first American to stand on top of Everest. Willie Unsold and Tom Hornbein completed the first traverse of the West Ridge, one of the most technically demanding achievements in the history of mountaineering. Through the 3 months of the expedition, 60 Eureka Draw-Tite tents held at Camp 2, established at 21,350 feet, and at higher camps above it, against the wind and cold that had defeated or killed expeditions before them. Norman Dyhrenfurth, the expedition leader, was directing his assessment. He stated that much of the expedition's success was attributable to, in his words, our fine new equipment, such as our vastly improved tents, with outside frames that can be set up in a high wind. A tent company from Binghamton, New York, had helped put Americans on top of the world. The decade that followed was the most innovative in Eureka's history. The outdoor recreation boom of the late 1960s and the early 1970s, driven by the same cultural forces that produced the Back to Nature movement, the expansion of the national parks, and the rise of backpacking as a mainstream activity, created demand for a new kind of tent. Not the canvas car camping structure, not the expedition tent designed for Himalayan conditions. Something in between, lightweight enough to carry on a backpacking trip, sturdy enough to handle rain and wind, and fast enough to set up so that a solo hiker could manage it after a long day on the trail. In 1973, Eureka introduced the Timberline. The Timberline was the first freestanding lightweight backpacking tent ever made. Its design used a simple two-pole crossing structure. The poles attached to the tent body using brass hooks, a system borrowed from the Draw-Tite's Everest tested hardware that created a self-supporting dome with no interior obstructions and no need for ground stakes. The tent weighed a fraction of conventional camping structures. It could be pitched in under 5 minutes on any surface, in wind, in rain, on rock, on frozen ground. It was the first tent that a single backpacker could carry, set up, and sleep in without help. Over 2,700 Timberlines sold in the first year. By its 10th anniversary, total Timberline sales had surpassed 1 million units. That same year, 1973, Sam Johnson of S.C. Johnson, the Wisconsin consumer products company known for Johnson wax and a long line of household products, purchased Eureka. Sam Johnson was an avid outdoorsman and conservationist, and the acquisition was not purely financial. He had a genuine belief in the outdoor recreation market and a genuine respect for what Eureka had built. The Legg family, after 56 years, handed the company to an owner who understood what it was and wanted to see it grow. Under Johnson, the Binghamton operation expanded. In 1978, Eureka tents sheltered the American Women's Himalayan Expedition to Annapurna Adversity, the first all-women's American team to summit an 8,000-meter peak. The brand's reputation in serious mountaineering and expedition use was built on a decade of performance at the highest altitudes on Earth. In 1980, Johnson Wax Associates consolidated Eureka with two other outdoor holdings, Camp Trails Company of Phoenix, Arizona, which made backpacks and sleeping bags, and Silva of LaPorte, Indiana, which made compasses and cross-country ski equipment. The combined entity was named Johnson Camping Incorporated, headquartered in Binghamton. Eureka expanded from 300 to 500 employees and from 3 to 5 manufacturing plants across the United States and Canada. Johnson Outdoors went public in 1981. The outdoor recreation company that had started with a tent factory in Binghamton now had shareholders, quarterly reporting obligations, and a portfolio of brands that extended well beyond the canvas products that had started it all. Old Town Canoe, Minn Kota trolling motors, Humminbird fish finders, Scuba Pro diving equipment. Eureka was one piece of a much larger portfolio, and its relative weight inside that portfolio would only decrease as the company grew. For the next 2 decades, Eureka held its position as one of the leading tent brands in the American market. The Timberline remained a bestseller. The military contract business tents for the U.S. Armed Forces, an unbroken thread running from the hospital ward. Tents of World War II through the Vietnam era and beyond continued alongside the consumer line. The Binghamton factory employed around 250 people. The company occupied 77,000 square feet of manufacturing space and a separate 42,000 square foot distribution center. It was a stable operation. It was not a growing one. The consumer tent market in the 2000s and 2010s was being transformed by offshore manufacturing. Chinese-made tents arrived in American retail at prices Binghamton could not approach. A 2-person backpacking tent that had once required skilled American labor to assemble now appeared at big box sporting goods chains for under $100. The margin compression across the recreational tent category was relentless and structural, not a temporary shift, but a permanent reconfiguration of how outdoor gear was made and sold. The backpacking market that the Timberline had helped create was now served by a generation of ultralight competitors. Brands like Big Agnes, MSR, and Nemo, founded in the 1990s and the 2000s, had been designed from the ground up for the modern backpacker's obsession with minimum pack weight. They competed not on price, but on grams, on materials, and on design innovation at the extreme edge of the weight spectrum. A sub-2-pound, two-person tent was achievable. Eureka, with its Binghamton manufacturing costs and its heritage design language, was not where that market was going. The military contract side of the business remained strong. The U.S. Armed Forces continued to need field tents and shelter systems that American manufacturers could produce to military specification, and Eureka's Binghamton facility retained the expertise and the certifications to supply them. The military division and the consumer division were two different businesses inside the same factory. One of them was shrinking while the other was holding steady. Johnson Outdoors continued to carry the brand through the 2010s, even as the Eureka camping segment's contribution to total company revenue became increasingly marginal. Johnson Outdoors had grown into a diversified outdoor company with annual revenues approaching $425 million, anchored by Humminbird fish finders, Minn Kota trolling motors, and Jetboil cooking systems, each of which commanded premium pricing and generated the kind of margins that tents sold through mass market channels could not match. Eureka was a legacy asset. Its camping sales grew 12% in fiscal 2022, reaching $70.4 million for the broader camping segment. But the margin profile and the competitive trajectory were not what they needed to be for a public company with shareholders expecting returns. In 2023, with the Eureka camping segment representing less than 1% of projected company sales, the board made its decision. On October 19, 2023, Johnson Outdoors announced it was exiting the Eureka business. Helen Johnson-Leipold, chairman and chief executive, called it a tough decision, but the right one for the company's long-term focus on Jetboil cooking systems. The camping product lines would be wound down through the end of 2024. The military and commercial tent division, the oldest continuous thread in the company's history, running from wagon covers in the 1890s through Army hospital tents in the 40s, was sold separately to a company called Record Group for $13.7 million. The Binghamton factory, the same building the Legg family had operated for decades, went with it. Record Group began selling Eureka's military tent designs under a new name, Rapid Deployable Systems. The Eureka brand name, including the exclamation mark, the green logo, and the Timberline, was not included in the sale. It belonged to no one. The tents that sheltered 60 climbers at 21,350 feet on Mount Everest in 1963 held against winds that would have collapsed most structures built at sea level. The company that designed them was gone by the end of 2024. Binghamton still has the factory. The tents it makes now don't carry the name that built it.